Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe. Hope you're all doing well on this Thursday morning, afternoon, or evening. If you are tuning in live here on Behance, let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. We have Anika and Jody and Sam and Andres and Susan, Marsha, Stony, Sean, Masayu, Chris, Jennifer. Who else? We have Ted and Mona. I saw some people. We have Ramin from Pakistan, and we have Murray from Brampton, Ontario. We have someone called High Tech. That's a great name. Robert, great to see everyone. Hope you're all well. We're almost through the week, which also means we're almost through this set of Photoshop challenges. And as a reminder, these last 2 weeks were completely live, and then the next 2 weeks we're going to be replaying these challenges so you can catch up, fine-tune your designs, submit your work, get some feedback, and always revisit what we did in these 9 challenges. We've got Rebecca from California and Andrea from Maryland. Mercurial is in the house, great to see you, and Lemonike, that's an interesting name, I like it. Lemonike. Hopefully I pronounced it correctly. Great to see all of you, and got Nimisha, I apologize, from Chicago. All right, so let's go ahead and hop over to my screen, and we're gonna get going with Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge number 8. We're almost at 9. So head on over to behance.net/challenge/Photoshop. Get all the information about the challenges. As I mentioned, we are on challenge number 8, and I'm going to be going over all of this in just a moment. So we have one more challenge left. Then we have 2 weeks of replays, and then new challenges will be upon us. We also have challenges on Illustrator, XD, and occasionally Premiere as well, which is super cool. So every single day you're going to receive a challenge during these 2 weeks, 9 challenges in total. Join us in our community chat over on Discord. Right now we have 2,435 people online right now. Many of you are already submitting your amazing designs that you've been taking part in during these challenges. Pinsky beers. There you go. Well, I've got coffee in front of me. Probably no drinking while I'm streaming. Wouldn't make for a good stream, I don't imagine. But all of you are submitting some incredible work. Some of you are even going back and revisiting some of the work and making some changes based on feedback, which is wonderful. So definitely hop in here, have a good time in our Discord community. You know, submit your work. Nightflower. I'm terrified, but I'm also impressed. I like it. Nicely done. I love when people take my face and just kind of go crazy with it. Gotta have fun in life, right? Good job. All right, watch us daily. I'm not live 9 o'clock Pacific time every morning during these challenges. And then share your work, like I mentioned, on Discord or on Behance using the keyword PS Daily Challenge. Anika is saying, I wasn't watching for a second and I was wondering why Howard got so quiet. Sam says, that's Howard's final form. It might be, and I would not complain about it. All right, so last week we started the process, selected mask, glow effects, photo editing, and we wrapped up last week with stylized text. This week we covered liquify, which is exactly what you saw with that lovely caricature of myself. Photo composition, icon, and badges yesterday, and then today we're gonna be looking at device mockups. Now, device mockups, this is gonna be kind of fun. Some of you may have seen me do something similar in Adobe XD, but we can also do something in Photoshop, and because of the nature of Photoshop, you can get a little bit more creative and stylized with your mockups. So let's go ahead and hop over to Photoshop. If you haven't grabbed that starter file yet, definitely download it to your computer, watch the video if you want again, and if we hop over to Photoshop, right over here, here's the template for today. So if I zoom in to our welcome card on the left, again, your prompt today is to place your designs within device mockups using smart objects. Now, that's the key for this challenge. We're going to be using smart objects. I'm going to show you the absolute magic of a smart object. And if you're an XD user and you're kind of following me here to the Photoshop challenges, they're kind of like components, and you're going to see some similarities there. And over to the right, I have included two different kinds of mockups, desktop and a phone. And both of these are very different, not just the device, but also the kind of images and assets that we're going to be exploring. And then down here, I've included a few designs that I've created in Adobe XD that you can use to place inside of your mockups. And I'm also going to show you how to get your designs directly from XD to this as well. So, first question is, why would you want to use this? Well, as you're designing UI, UX, and all that fun stuff, all these elements, you might want to showcase it inside of a device. So if you're presenting it to clients or stakeholders or on social media, you might want to help people visualize what it's going to look like in a real world environment. And something like this or something like this will absolutely help. So we're going to start off with the desktop. And if I hop over to that artboard, which is the one at the very bottom of the layers panel, what you're going to notice is this one in particular is layered. So I grabbed this from Adobe stock, and I'll remind you one more time that there is a completely free section of Adobe stock, and I'm going to dive into here later, but you can dive in there and search for device frames or desktops or whatever it might be. But this one is going to be a little bit easier, right? Because we have all the layers. Let me pull this up a little bit. Whoops, I pulled it out of the frame. There, oh, I messed it up. Now it's backwards. Way to go, Howard. There we go. Okay, there we go. That's better. So we have all of our layers, right? We have our reflection, we have our screen, we have our device, which is made up of all these little bits and pieces of the base and the screen, all that stuff. Most of this we will not need to really pay attention to. But what we do want to pay attention to is the screen layer, which is basically this rectangle here. Now in this particular device, it is, I believe, a rasterized image. So it's not like actual rectangle, right? You could absolutely make it a rectangle, but in this case, we probably don't need it. What we're going to do is we're going to be using a clipping mask for this. So if we hop down here, we have this design asset that we're going to be using. This is more or less a desktop-based design. And what I can do is I can either copy it or drag it up here. I'm going to just actually copy it to my clipboard, hop over here, select the screen layer. And I should note that if you don't have auto select turned on at the top, which I personally don't like, but some people do, you can hold down your Command key on the Mac, Control key on Windows, and click on the various layers to jump straight to them. So if I just click on the screen, I'm going to be taken directly there. Now I'm going to go ahead and paste this layer. And the first thing I want to do is make sure that it is the right size. So before I start resizing things, we're going to convert this into a smart object. Now, I'm going to show you why that's so important in this example. If I were to simply grab this and resize it inwards like this, let's assume that the screen is this small and press return to accept. And then I decide, well, you know what? I want the device a little bit larger, or I want the screenshot to focus more on a specific area. And I resize it again and resize it back to the size it was. You're going to notice it is substantially more blurry and pixelated than it is down here, because it is a rasterized image. So when you resize it down, all the pixels are crunched together, and when you resize it up, that data doesn't exist anymore. So what I'm going to do is inside of my layers panel, I'm going to right click on this screenshot and then convert to smart object. Or you can do it under the filter menu and then convert for smart filters. Basically the same thing. So I'm going to convert it for a smart object. And now if I do the exact same thing, resize it down, accept, and then resize up again, no loss in data, because all that data is preserved inside of that smart object. And if you need to access that data and you want to edit the original, you simply double click on this thumbnail, which you'll notice right at the bottom contains the smart object thumbnail. So if you double click on that, a new document is going to open, which is your smart object. and it contains all the original data of that layer or all the layers that you converted into the smart object. You can make your changes, save it, and it'll update over here. But what we want to do is resize this down so that it more or less fits this desktop screen. Right about there. Now what you're going to notice is that the screen is a little bit smaller or narrower, right? So it kind of overflows, which we don't want. Now we talked a little bit about clipping masks in a previous challenge. So very simply, what we're going to do is we have our desktop design. We have that screenshot above the screen layer, and that's very important. Now there are other ways of doing it, including masking. I prefer clipping masks. Makes it a little bit easier to move things around. So if you hold down your Alt or Option key and hover in between these two layers, you'll notice that little icon. Or you can right click and then create clipping mask right there. And that's going to take that desktop design screenshot and clip it inside of that screen layer. So I can very easily move it around if I need to, and it's going to remain clipped, which is wonderful. So this is definitely, a more simple example of what you might want to do in a situation like this. Now, one of the cool benefits about smart objects is that it makes updating very simple. So if I actually hop over to Adobe XD for a moment, I do have some designs that I have been working on, very similar to this one here. Maybe I want to replace this design with one of these. So maybe if I hop over here to this screen, I can simply either export it by right-clicking and then export selected, or I can copy it to my clipboard, hop over here, and now I have two different options, right? I can either select the screen layer in my layers panel and then paste, and that's actually going to clip it automatically because there's another clipped object right above it. But I can't see it because that other clipped object is there. So if I hide that one, you're going to notice we now have our screen. And I can make this a little bit larger. Now I will note that this device is larger than the actual mockup over here. So what I would likely do is export this at 2x. That way I can import it and I won't have any loss in quality, right? Let me actually grab another one that's a little bit larger. Let's say this one over here. Copy that, same process, paste it into place. And then if I need to, I can resize it like that. So that's one option. The other option is because over on this layer here, we're using a smart object, we can simply double click to open it up like I showed you before. Paste this inwards, and again, it's not the right size, but that's okay. And then now that I've edited this smart object, I can save it, Command and Control S, just like you would save any other document. And now when we go over to our original design, it's updated. And it's the same layer as you can see here. It's just the new design. But all that data is still there. So, right, we can hide it, show it, do whatever we need to do. We can add some shapes if we wanted to. I don't know why you would, but you can definitely do that. And then once you save it, it'll update on this screen here, which is great, right? However, we have a little bit more of a complex example. You're going to take a look at this mock-up here. Now, of course, ideally, what you would want to do is find a vector design that's kind of like this, or one that at least contains the screen. This one is a flattened, rasterized image, right? Sean is saying or asking, is a not smart object? Oh, okay, he's responding to Carol, I think, not a smart object screen in pixels. Okay, I think you're all just talking amongst yourselves. So this one is not the ideal scenario, but something that a lot of designers will run into, right? You have this mock-up of a phone, and it's completely rasterized, it's completely flattened. So we have a little bit of a challenge here. We want to be able to get this design here, right, into this mockup. Or we want to get, one of these phone designs into that mockup as well. So we need to do some work here. The first thing we want to do is we want to either isolate the screen or cut out a hole inside of this device. And I think cutting out a hole in the screen is probably going to be our best bet. Now, luckily, in this particular example, we have a fairly white screen. So we should be able to grab something like our magic wand tool, which is right here on the left-hand side. Click, and now we have our selection of our screen. It doesn't look perfect. We're going to take a look at that in a second. And what essentially we want to do, we want to mask this area out. So if I were to simply click on the mask, it's going to mask everything else out, which we don't want. So I'm going to hold down my Alt-Option key and click on the mask icon at the bottom of the layers panel, boop, just like that, and it masks the screen out. Of course, now the artboard color is white, so we can't see any difference. But if I select that artboard and change this to maybe black, we can now see what it's done. Now there's a little bit of a border around it, probably totally fine. We can definitely add another border if we wanted to kind of smooth that out, or we can do a better selection, but this should work. So what this will allow us to do is we can now grab this phone design, and just like we did with the desktop version, I can copy it to my clipboard, hop over here, I can paste it, and I can move it behind. But you're going to notice it's not really fitting, like you don't want to send this anywhere. Now you might think, okay, well we can just rotate this and it'll fit. Not really, right? Because the phone in this particular example is on a little bit of a perspective. It's not perfectly rotated, 15 degrees or 30 degrees or whatever it might be. It's actually rotated in space a little bit. So what's the solution? Well, here's the solution. Now, the first thing we want to do before we do any rotating, any skewing, any of that fun stuff, is we want to convert this into a smart object right off the bat. We want to do that in its flattened view. So it looks just like this, right? So when it's like this, we're gonna, just like we did before, we're gonna right click and convert to smart object. Again, you can do that under the filter menu if you want. And now that's been preserved, which is the most important part of all of this. And you're gonna see exactly why in just a moment. So now that it's been converted into a smart object, we'll do the same thing we did. We'll move this layer behind the mock-up of the phone. And instead of simply rotating like we tried to do before, which we realized didn't really work because there's a little bit of perspective there, what we're going to do is we're going to activate our transform controls, Command and Control T. And now we're going to hold down the Command key on the Mac or the Control key on Windows. And you're going to notice if I zoom in here, so this is with no modifier keys held down. Keep an eye on the cursor or the pointer. And now I'm holding down my Command key on the Mac or Control key on Windows. So it gives you this different arrow. And this will allow you to skew and push this point somewhere else. So with that held down, I'm gonna pull this over to the side here. And I'm gonna grab the one at the top left. I'm gonna pull that over to the side. Bottom left, I'm gonna pull this all the way over. And then bottom right. So what I'm doing is I'm skewing this particular smart object, which contains the phone design, to make it fit inside of this device. And I'm just going to make sure all the lines line up as close as possible. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then if I press return, there's the final result, right? So now it kind of looks like it all blends in really nicely. And what's kind of nice is because we have this mask set up here, we can now include some additional elements behind it. So if I go and let's say grab my pen tool, shortcut key P, and let's say one up there, maybe one down here, and then I'm just gonna very roughly add the rest of the points in. Because it's behind that phone layer, we don't see all that weirdness that we just created. We only see what's inside of the screen. So I can change this to, let's say, white, and then maybe experiment with the blend modes like soft light maybe, or overlay. I think soft light could work, and then drop the opacity. So now we have a little bit of reflection on our mockup, right? Which looks great. So this looks a lot better than it did before when we simply tried to grab the image, rotate it, and then kind of fit it in. Didn't look that great. But now we have a pretty decent looking mockup. But again, to stress the importance of smart objects, updating this, if it was not a smart object, would be very impossible. You basically have to redo the entire process. However, because we have a smart object and we created that smart object at the very beginning before we did any transformations or skewing or any of that stuff, if we were to double click on the smart object, we're going to see that screenshot or that mockup exactly how it was before we converted it, right? So someone's asking, I hope there's no issues regarding Photoshop version for this. I mean, there shouldn't be. I haven't run into any issues, so I don't believe so. If you do run into any issues, definitely throw it in the chat or ask on Discord or even on Twitter. But so here's what it looked like before we converted to a smart object. So now if we were to go back to Adobe XD, or if you have other designs on your computer, or if you're working on them even in Photoshop as layered documents, I can grab maybe, let's say, I don't know, let's say this one here. I'm going to copy this to my clipboard, hop over here, paste it into place. Again, it is a little bit smaller, but that's totally fine. I can also enlarge this artboard here, just so I have a little bit more data to work with. Copy that to my clipboard, pop it over here. I guess I didn't need that data, did I? Probably not. I'm going to make this larger. And like I mentioned earlier, ideally I would export this mockup that I created in Adobe XD at 2x, so it would fit really nicely inside of this. But the point is, if I go ahead and save this, which again is that smart object, I think I'm losing my voice, by the way. If I save that and hop back over to this document, there it is, right? So I didn't have to do any additional transformations. I didn't have to do any additional skewing, none of that stuff. I just had to double click on the smart object. It opened up, make my changes, and we're good to go. Excuse me. And the same works if you're designing from scratch, right? So you can create that smart object basically as a blank canvas, and then you can start adding in elements. So if you are working on maybe a mobile app in Photoshop from scratch, right? You can create things like this. Maybe we'll add a few areas here. Let's find our circle. I am definitely losing my voice. It is gone. By tomorrow, I just won't be able to say anything. I'll just very quickly rough something in here, just so you can see what the power of smart objects is. It doesn't have to be rasterized images, right? Maybe I'll move this over here. And then maybe we'll create a little hamburger menu. While I'm doing this, what is all of your favorite menus? There's hamburger menus, there's kebab menus, there's all these different kinds. Wow, my voice is just going. It's like you're all watching my voice being lost in real time. This is wonderful. So I'll just create one more going down here. And now we've done a very simple mockup in Photoshop, but it's inside of the smart object. So if I save this and then hop back over here, there it is. And all of that data is preserved, except the menu for some. Oh, where did the menu go? I lost the hamburger menu. Oh, there it is. It went up there for some reason. Hello. Right, so all that data is completely preserved. So I can make those changes, edit the vector images inside of the smart object, or vector shapes, I should say. And then once I save it and hop back over here, it's all waiting for me, which is great. So, as a very quick recap, we covered adding flattened mockups or designs to a desktop device frame. And this one was a little bit easier because we did use a vectorized and layered object that we grabbed from Adobe stock. And by the way, I should note that if you type in something like desktop device, you're going to get quite a few. And by default, you'll see mostly images, but over to the left, you can actually filter by, actually illustration is probably not the right one. It's vectors. So all of these are vector and they're completely free. And this is the one that I actually downloaded and licensed. And you can open them in Illustrator, you can open them in Photoshop, whatever it might be. So you can definitely do this process in Illustrator if you want to. And all these are vector. So if you want to practice on an iPhone or whatever it might be, you can definitely grab some devices directly from here. So that is going to just about do it for today. I'm going to go drink some water and try and get my voice back for tomorrow. I have 2 streams tomorrow, wrapping up the daily creative challenge, and I have my Adobe XD Masterclass at 12 o'clock Pacific. So I hope to see some of you there. Big thanks to everyone who has tuned in, Marsha and Umacorn and Sean and Chris and Namisha and Gareth and Nika. Great to see all of you. In just a few moments, we have video editing for YouTube with the Fung Brothers. That should be a lot of fun. Stick around for that, and I will see you all tomorrow.